Boxing King Media, powered by BYD. It's episode 19 of the Brutally Honest podcast. Dom, we're back here for another update on all current boxing matters. I know you've got dog shit on your shoes.
I did. I've had a walk around and managed to get it off. But that's what happens. You can be going along in life, everything's great, and then you step in some dog shit, and look what happens. We're back in here doing these interviews, so that's good.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I stepped in dog shit. Yes, it's not pleasant because it doesn't come off, does it?
No, but I've managed to do it. Look, you can see on the bottom of these, it's all come off. Look at that.
Good
all
effort.
gone. I've had a walk around, walked in some grass, walked in some water, and it's off. I didn't want to be sat here breathing that in while we're doing this interview. It really put me off.
Yep. People will be thinking we're absolutely smashing it with this podcast, with this massive
We are, aren't we?
sponsor. Well, we are kind of smashing it, but people will be looking at all these sponsors that you've put up on this board here. They'll be thinking Dominic Ingle's raking it in.
Well, do you know what? It's funny because a lot of these people have come in on the back of the interviews what they've seen on Boxing King Media, believe it or not. Obviously got BYD.
Brilliant.
Uber Bikes, he's a great fella, him. He's a big boxing fan. Smokey's growing Doncaster. Clients and big boxing fans, follow boxing all over. This fellow was a client and he's a big boxing fan. So all these are, the common denominator is they're all boxing fans and they all watch the podcast. So it's no wonder that they've jumped on board.
Brilliant. Also that they're sponsoring the Ingle Gym Christmas Cracker Amateur Show, which is happening on the 13th, Friday the 13th of December. Tickets are £15 on the door. What's the venue again, Luca?
Greensboro Working Men Club, Rotherham.
Greensboro Working Men's Club in Rotherham. All the next generation of Ingle fighters are going to be on the show. So if you want to get tickets, the £15 on the door. Anyone who can look out for on the show, Dom?
We've got a few good kids. We've got a little lad called Junaid. He's a little prospect coming through. He's had a few fights now. He's only young. I think he's about 10 or 11. He's one to watch. But yeah, there's a lot of kids coming through, and I don't really want to put. The trouble is when you mention people on these things, you don't want to put any pressure on them. And I think the best thing to do is not have any expectations. Let people come along. It's a great night of boxing because it's kids having a scrap. It's a bit like them schoolyard fights. We are, a bit more organised, and all the families turn up, their friends, and it's a fantastic crowd. And you know what? They all stay for the fights as well. They tend to stay. All the fans staying for the whole night. So it'll be a good evening of boxing.
Good stuff. We'll talk about some of the stuff that we're not caught up for a few weeks, but I think last time we spoke about Adam Azim, O'Hara Davis. You saw the fight, Adam stopped him in, I think it was around 8 or something. What did you make of his performance? I know O'Hara's since retired.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we spoke about this fight a few interviews ago, and I said, look, O'Hara Davis in his day was a dangerous fighter. He was on the up at the time, and Adam Azim's obviously the new kid on the block, and boxing's always the case that you're either meeting somebody on the way up or somebody on the way down. It's very rare that fighters both meet at the peak, and an example of that was Lennox Lewis against Mike Tyson, and when they boxed each other, they were probably both past the best, and it was only probably down to Lennox Lewis living a more controlled life, and Tyson escalating over the last few years. Why Lennox came out on top, because they were, for me, although it was a good fight, they were both shadows of the former self, and it probably wouldn't make any sense for them to meet at the peak. And be knocking lumps off each other. I mean, you look at Bivol and Beterbiev, the meeting at the peak, and you don't really get those fights. So it's always a case of, in boxing, it's all about time scales and time frames. And I think, personally, and it might not go down well, I think, both at the peak, O'Hara Davis at his very best, and Adam Azim at his very best, which is probably now. I think O'Hara would have beaten him.
You think he's at his best at 22 years old?
Well, he's the best up to now, because we don't know he's going to be at 23 or 24 or 25. So he's got to be at his best. He can't have been better a year ago or 2 years ago, because he obviously then he would have regressed. So the version that we see of him now at his age that he is, which is what?
22.
Right, at 22 is the best version he can be at, because he's not 23 and he's not 24 and 25. So what I'm saying to you is, it's about timing. Obviously, O'Hara Davis isn't at his best, so that's why it's an even match. He's coming down, Adam Azim's coming up and they've crossed somewhere here. Have they crossed at this level? Have they crossed when Azim's here and O'Hara's there? Or was a bit too good and Azim's... It's not. They've got him at the right time. O'Hara's on the way down and Azim's ascending. So he's got him at the right time, and that's what matchmaking is about. It's getting the match at the right time. And if, you know, O'Hara Davis, a few fights back, you know, before he got beaten his last fight, it could have been a difficult fight, but that's what boxing's about, you know. That's the timing and that's the beauty of boxing. So, you know, he's got a lot more to come. Adam Azim, he's still young, he's still learning, and he's been manoeuvred. You know, look, he was supposed to fight Dalton Smith. They manoeuvred that, and probably for the better. So, you know, Dalton Smith will go on to do his thing, and Adam Azim will go on to do his thing, and eventually they'll both meet at the perfect moment, and it should be a good fight.
Well, I did ask O'Hara Davis after the fight, and obviously I'm assuming he's probably the best person to give us his opinion, because obviously he's fought Josh Taylor, he's fought that Barossa guy who stopped him, and he's obviously been around the block. And in his own words, he said, Jack Cattrall as well, in his words, he said Adam Azim was the most explosive fighter that he's fought, and the best he fought as well.
Well, you know, I'm not saying that that's not true, but what I would say is, realistically, what fighter's going to say, well, you know, he weren't that good. He's not as good as the rest of them. And they think, well, why didn't you beat him then? So you've always got to make out that the last person you box is the best. And to get beat in the fashion that he did. I always remember when Kell Brook boxed Matthew Hatton. And I think Matthew Hatton said to him afterwards, or Kell told me this is what he said. He said, oh, I can't believe it, you punch harder than Canelo. And Kell said, it went to my head a bit, that. And I thought, well, you know, of course he's going to say that. He's going to say that you're better than Canelo, or you punch hard. I said, because you've just beat him. I says, he did 12 rounds with Canelo. I says, and Kell actually gave him more of a, you know, bit of a beating than Canelo did. And fair play to Matthew Hatton, not put him down. A tough kid, you know, with the ability he had and his resources, he did really well. You know, he survived 12 rounds against Canelo when so many people didn't. But that's what I'm saying to you, fighters. I'm not going to say that he's not telling the truth, or O'Hara Davis, but, you know, it just makes sense for him to blow Adam Azim up a little bit, because that's what you got to do. He is the next thing on the block, and he will be a good kid as the years roll on.
There was a bit of talk, you know, you mentioned Dalton Smith in the end. Do you think it's right for that fight to take place later down the line when it's bigger, or do you think they should be fighting each other now?
No, I think it should come. That fight should happen when it's absolutely necessary, when they've both kind of explored all the routes they can and remained unbeaten, because it's going to be one of them fights, in my opinion, that, because Dalton Smith's a bit older as well, that whoever loses in that fight, it's going to be a difficult road back, depending how they lose. So if it's a close fight, fair enough, but Adam Azim is with who?
Shane McGuigan and Boxer.
Right, so he's with Boxer, and to be honest, you know, they're not doing a great deal of the Boxer. There's not a lot of shows going on. It's not, you know, Sky, it's not really, it doesn't seem to me to be at the forefront anymore. So what you need when you're in the position where Adam Azim is, you need a good promotional team with regular shows, and if you get beat, you can bounce back and they can put you on and build you up. You look at what Frank Warren used to do in the olden days. You get beat, you'd be straight back out again. You box again, and you'll be back on. Look what they did with people like Frank Bruno. You got beat, you get you an easy win, back in, build you up and back in again. And that's it. But what happens these days is when a fighter gets beat, they're off for a certain period of time. Inactivity. I was just looking the other day where I see that it's almost been a year since Katie Taylor boxed, I think. And that's, you can't really have that when you're that age, over 30. You can't be having that amount of time out of the ring. That could be 3 fights in a 12-month period, realistically, for a fighter. That's 3 fights down, and time's not on your side. So, you know, in this day and age, that's why the career-ending fights or the career-defining fights don't always happen, because there's going to be a casualty, and somebody's going to get left behind if you haven't got the right promotional team pushing them back on track again.
Good stuff. And you know, you mentioned Frank Warren there. I'm just going to briefly talk about, I don't know if you can give your opinions on what Frank Warren's done in the last year or so, you know, because say 18 months, 2 years ago, you know, when him and Eddie were having back and forth, Eddie was calling him a small hole promoter, and now we've seen Frank's current stable, British fighters wise, he's obviously got Tyson Fury, Daniel Dubois, Joseph Parker, Zile Zhang, Joe Joyce, Chisora, Fabio Wardley, Moses Ituma, Lona Sokoli, who's just signed up, David Adley, Sol Dakers, Another young amateur kid who's a heavyweight, Lewis Williams, he signed up as well. He's re-signed Hamza Shiraz, Nick Ball. But obviously with Matchroom, we've seen a lot of their fighters tend to be on the American side. Obviously you've got Jaron Ennis, Bam Bam Rodriguez, Sonny Edwards, they're fighting next week. What do you kind of make of that, where it seems like, one promotional outfit's concentrating on the upcoming UK fighters and the other ones are trying to get the stars in the US?
Well, one thing I'll say, worked with a lot of promoters in the day, Mickey Duff, Frank Warren, Mick Hennessy, Barry and Eddie Hearn. The one thing about Frank is, and it's the way you've got to be, you've got to play the long game in boxing. That's what you've got to do. You've got to play the long game. And the one common thread with Frank is that when he gets a fighter, he will build them up, and keep them in a position until they're ready for that massive big fight. He won't put them in a fight when there's a possibility to get him beat, in a like a small fight. If you're going to get beat with Frank, it's going to be in the best fight of your life type of thing, more often than not, Whereas Eddie, it seems, will take the opportunity and take the risk and put the fight in and cross their fingers and hope that they win. He does build fighters up, but not in the same way that Frank does, that Frank has over the years. And an example, I always remember Enzo Macronelli built him up, and then he put him in with David A, and I think it was Wembley. It was absolutely packed. And for me, as much as I like Enzo Macronelli, I thought it was going to be a very difficult fight for him. David A was riding the crest of the wave at the time, and Enzo got done in a couple of rounds, but it was probably Enzo's biggest payday, biggest fight of his life at that point, and he went on and had other fights. But that was an example of it. That when it came to the crunch, Frank's you're gonna lose. You're better off losing in a world title fight than a British title fight, because losing there, it's hard to go back up that. You lose at British, you lose at world title level. You can always go back in again at world title level, or just slightly below, and then get back in for a world title once you've attained that level. So it's no surprise why Frank's attracting the talent in the UK, because if people have got sense, they'll be looking at that and thinking, oh, well, yeah, he seems to be doing, look what he's done with this kid, look what he's done with that kid. And Eddie does go with the American stuff. And, at one time when Eddie was flying through on Sky, he was nicking all the UK fighters. Fighters go where they think they're going to get the best opportunities, and they weigh it up, or the people dealing with them weigh it up. And yeah, it's the lesser of it's almost the lesser of two evils or four evils, depending on which way you wanna view it. So you've got to go for the best bet and the one that suits you. And this time, Frank seems to be riding the crest of a wave.
But who would you say who's right or wrong? Because I think Eddie's argument is, if you're good enough, you
can be good enough. But let's look at the example. We go back to the heavyweights recently. The American guy who boxed, I forget what they call him there, the African guy. No,
Matchroom fighter.
The fighter, what do you call him? Martin. Bacaulay. Yeah, sorry, Bacaulay. I thought you said Bacaulay. Martin Bacaulay against the American guy. It's like, he was obviously good enough, but Bacaulay got the experience. He was a big, solid unit, and it wasn't a fight that he needed to take. It was only a benefit to Bacaulay. So that's the thing. If I'd have been managing, what was it?
Jared Adamson.
Yeah, Jared. I want to put him in. Why take that risk? It's not a world title fight. It's not there's no need.
I think the money.
It don't matter about the money comes, because let's say it's the money. Let's say he's got paid a lot of money. He's had that fight. Where's his money going to be now? It's not going to be the same money. It's not even going to be 50%. It's going to be about 25%. And it's funny because when I went to see Tyson the other week, popped in. He was talking about the fights he had where he didn't get paid what he should have got, and he boxed for more or less nothing. And there were times when he didn't get paid, and he had to wait for months for his money. And he said, I just grinned and bared it, and knowing that the payoff's going to come at the end, because I had belief in myself. I believe no matter what, whether I got paid, it really matter whether I got paid. I just needed to win, and as long as I kept on winning, I was progressing up that ladder to that big fight. And he goes, even when I got my big fight against Klitschko, he goes, it wasn't life-changing money. He says, so I had the hardest fight of my life, and it wasn't, I've had easier fights now for more money. He says it wasn't life-changing money, and I had to keep fighting to get to that point. Now he's got to the point where he's making millions from fights. That's what you've got. Why you've got to play the long game. You know, you've got to delay. You've got to delay it. You can't just think, well, get me money now. The thing is with boxing, it is a long game, and all the champions we've ever had, it's been a long game. Kell Brook, 20 years in the making. Junior Witter, Johnny Nelson. They've all been a long project, and they're the ones who've had the solid training behind them, and they've come through and they've become world champion. Fair
play. One of the guys I mentioned there, Daniel Dubois, I think it's come out now. Frank Warren mentioned it to Box Nation yesterday that AJ appears to have an injury, so he won't be ready for Feb. They want to get Daniel Dubois out in February again. The rumours are Joseph Parker, but he's not in the IBF top 15. So what do you make of a potential Joseph Parker versus Dubois, or the other name that is Fabio Wardley versus Dubois?
I think, as good as Fabio Wardley's win was against Fraser, he's not ready for the likes of Dubois. The punch power difference between Dubois and him is immense, and so
on paper the percentage is the same.
It don't matter, does it? It's like, I just think that with Dubois, he's come through the ups and downs of boxing. He's had setbacks. He's come through those setbacks, and he's in his peak, so to speak. So he's a viable opponent, Fabio Wardley, but you wouldn't expect him to cause Dubois any problems. It might be a bit of a tear up, and I think that's just going to come down in the end of the firepower. I think that's where Dubois is going to, probably come through. As for Joseph Parker, well, that's a decent fight again, but obviously he's not in the ratings. But it doesn't mean he can't get into the ratings in the time necessary, does it? He could be.
Okay. And then the press conference, Fury versus Usyk, 2 press conference was last week. We saw Alexander Usyk dress up as the Hitman character. I don't know if you've seen the movie or the character.
I've not seen the movie, but somebody told me about the character, to be honest.
Yeah, basically the guy gets contracts and just goes and ends people's lives. And he did something interesting in the press conference where he got a picture out of his suitcase and he made Tyson sign it, and it was a picture of him landing the left hand on Tyson, which obviously changed that first fight. What did you kind of make of that? Mind games or?
You've got to bring entertainment into boxing, and fair play to Tyson for going along with it. You go back years back when you got Nigel Benn and Eubank. There'd be none of that, because I think it was it Ben who completely ignored Eubank and won't engage in anything. But they're selling the fight, and so they should, because it's coming up to Christmas, it's pantomime season, isn't it? So we need plenty of characters. And it's funny how the characters have changed from Tyson when he appeared as Batman that time and ran over took over the scene, and now it's Usyk doing the same thing. So you need that kind of cartooniness, as I'd say, in it. You need some kind of storyline, a bit like the wrestling. People like it, and with Usyk playing the hitman, which is is entitled to do. But if he was down as the hitman, then he'd be getting the sack money, because the shot that he put on Tyson didn't finish him. So he's not a very good hitman, is he? So he's gonna have to think about that one next time. Whoever's planning his character, he'll have to think about somebody else. Maybe James Fox in the one when he's trying to kill De Gaulle. I think it's that one anyway. I think it's that one. So is it 39? Not 39 steps, but it's one of them. I forget which one it is now. And they're trying to assassinate De Gaulle, and I think they miss. So maybe that character instead. But that's the thing. He had the chance to finish Tyson, and he kind of hit Tyson with several unanswered shots, and still couldn't put Tyson away. And a lot of me thinks that's down to that he just didn't have it in him to finish Tyson. Or maybe he probably thought to himself, well, I'm in front, I'm winning the fight. If I knock him out, there's not really a question of a rematch. It's probably not a rematch, and maybe he held back, I don't know. But, I think in Tyson's mind, I think Tyson's thinking, he's hit me with everything he's got. I've took all his best shots with the hands down. Next time I know what I'm going to do. I think that's what it's going to be.
Well, he was that invested in the character because on
Day of the Jackal. That's the one. Day of the Jackal. He can be the assassin. He can be the assassin in the Day of the Jackal, because I think he missed.
Oh, did he? Okay, I don't know that movie, but
yeah, it's an old one.
Well, he was that much in the character because I asked him for an interview on the day of the press conference, and he literally gave me a fist bump, and it was like a one-word answer. And then I spoke to him the next day, and I ended up interviewing him on an airport runway, which was a new experience. But
He wasn't climbing into the fuselage, was he?
no,
Through
we was
the
actually
wheels?
right next to his private
Yeah.
jet, which was quite an experience in itself. But he said because he was that much in the character, he didn't want to do any interviews because he goes, it would have looked wrong for me to have long conversations with people when I'm like supposed to be this hitman.
Well, let's hope when he gets to this show, he don't get his gloves out in pieces and start assembling them together like, you know, when they're putting guns together, we all, you know, in a small suitcase that big, and then they come out with a rifle about 12 foot. So if USYK turns up at the show with a boxing gloves in 4 or 5 pieces, putting them together, we know we're in for an hard fight, aren't we? He's come in the role as the assassin.
Well, it's gonna be fascinating. Looking forward to that next. We're just 7-8 weeks away. The other big fight next weekend. In fact, before I talk about that, we'll talk about Campbell Hatton. He rematched. You know, credit to him. He went straight in and took a rematch with Steffi Bull's fighter Jimmy Flint. He lost the first fight on a close decision, and he went and changed gyms, joined Ben Davison. I think it was Barry Smith that was actually training him. And then obviously lost again. One of the things that stuck out to me was the post-fight press conference, and I've never really seen Eddie Hearn like be this to the point, especially with a big name in his stable. I'll quote it. He said, "He just wasn't really good enough, and he's not shown any progression since the last defeat." What do you make of that and the performance, the loss?
Well, it's true, innit? He's not really made, and I think as Jimmy Joe Flint lost since he boxed.
No, I think
he has.
Oh, he has actually, yeah. Yeah.
So
he did actually, yeah.
he's beat Campbell Hatton, he's lost, and then he's beat Campbell Hatton again. And look, the thing is, you've got to be realistic. I mean, fair play to Campbell that he's boxed, he's followed in his dad's footsteps, but it doesn't follow that because your dad was a great boxer that you're going to be the same. It's like you look at Ricky, great boxer, great fighter, should I say, more of a great fighter, and you look at Matthew, his brother, cut from the same cloth, but not on the same level as Ricky. And then you've got his lad again, and not the same. And it doesn't automatically follow. And then we'll go back to my favourite character, Chris Eubank Jr., a diluted version of his dad. He's got all the talk and he's got the surname and he's got the chat, but he's not got what his dad had. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with Eddie saying that because, he's boxed him twice and he's been beat twice. So it's probably time for Campbell to think about doing something else because boxing is a long, hard game. And no disrespect to Jimmy Joe Flint, he's not the best. His central area title, it's the first rung of the ladder. And if you can't get past the first rung of the ladder, then, you're not going to kind of get up any further, are you?
What did you make of Eddie's post-fight reaction?
What, to saying that he's
brutally honest? He was actually
but I've just answered that, and I said he's right in what he said. It's not Eddie's his promoter, and it'd be no good if Eddie turned around and said, "Well, I think it was this and I think it was that." Well, it's not. He's got beat twice, and back in the day, if you got with a promoter, I think Frank Maloney was the most famous. When you got beat twice with Frank Maloney, he just give you your contract back and told you to do one. That's the way it is because you can only give the fighters the fights they want, but if they're not coming up to the mark, what's the point?
He did also suggest that maybe he should go the small hall shows away from the TV and cameras and
Nothing to do with that. He just hasn't got. It's not being disrespectful.
Would that help him?
Not really. He just hasn't got the ability. He's not a natural, a natural boxer. He's not. It's just as simple as that. He's just not, and there's nothing you can do about that, because to learn, you've got to come out of your environment. You'd have to, probably go to America, go around all the gyms there, have some hard sport, see the hard life, get the motivation, and realise what it's like because he's not had to come up through the hard way. He hasn't. He got in with a good promoter straight off. He's never had to. Realistically, you should start off on the small hall shows and build your way up, and learn that way. Not. It's a bit like it's difficult when you've been at the bottom, when you start like so many of my fighters, like Kid Galahad, even Kell Brook used to box in Sheffield, on Dennis Hobson shows in the Octagon, and he sell about 50 or 60 tickets, and you went from that to selling out stadiums. You realise at the bottom level where you are and how much you have to fight and dig in and sacrifice to get to the top. And if you're already halfway there in your first fight, and you know cars are picking you up, you're staying in nice hotels, everybody's running around after you because you've got this good second name, you get like a bit of a false idea of what boxing's like. You know, you've got to have it rough, you've got to struggle to get where you need to be. So I go back to the early days with the fighters I've had, you know, where we're staying in. I remember a time when we first started boxing for Frank Warren, me and Kell would be sharing a room. You know, that's what it was. That's the budget. Yeah, you've got a room and there's 2 single beds in there. There you go. I don't know how I put it with my snoring, but anyway, we got through that. So you start from that, and then as you progress up, you're in the bigger hotels, you're getting the bigger paydays, you're getting carried around. We used to catch taxis to the venue and nobody was carrying you. You had to learn it the tough way, and then you appreciated it more and you fought for it more. And realised that one slip, we used to say about Kell, you know, Kell's was like a tightrope walker. In a circus on a Saturday night with no safety net. You fall off that line, you're dead. He had no safety net of a job or anything else. If he got beat that night, that was kind of his career over. Whereas a lot of fighters, they have jobs or they have backups or whatever. With him, it was a do or die situation every time he fought.